The two of us were sent to the industry trade show in Charlotte, and I took it calmly. This was just a business trip, after all. He was the boss. I was the subordinate. Everything was simple. The hotel was cozy in the historic downtown area, with views of old churches and green hills. After the first day of the exhibition, Marcus suggested we walk along the riverside and have dinner at a restaurant famous for its smoked brisket sliders. I agreed, purely out of politeness, of course. But as soon as I stepped out of my room and saw him at the entrance in a light shirt with rolled-up sleeves, matching trousers, and slightly damp post-shower hair, something inside me trembled. I had put on a beige form-fitting dress that I rarely wore out, long sleeves and high neckline, but with thin fabric that emphasized everything that needed emphasizing. I let my hair down and touched my lips with a hint of gloss. Thin earrings and chains hung to my collarbones. I wanted to look beautiful, simply beautiful. Dinner was strangely pleasant. We laughed, discussed books, politics, office dramas. He listened attentively, looked into my eyes a little longer than was proper. I caught myself unable to stop noticing his hands. Large, confident, with neat nails and slightly weathered skin. At some point, he moved a strand of hair from my face, calmly, almost domestically, but I tensed up inside, not from fear, from desire. After dinner, we walked for a long time. There was silence by the river. You could only hear the wind rustling in the trees and his breathing beside me. We stopped at a wrought iron fence. He lightly touched my back, and I seemed to dissolve. I knew this was wrong. I had a husband, he had a wife in Minneapolis, but in that second, nothing mattered. I don't know who leaned in first. The kiss was careful, soft, almost apologetic, but everything inside me ignited. When he took my hand, I didn't resist. We didn't speak, just silently went up to his room. There was no rush. The room was dim, and the lights of nighttime Charlotte flickered in the window. He wasn't hurrying. His fingers easily slid along the zipper of my dress. I was trembling like a girl, though inside I felt like a woman who hadn't been allowed to be desired for a long time. Under the dress, I wore lace beige lingerie, a gift to myself that I usually didn't wear every day. He ran his palm over my shoulders and quietly said, "You're driving me crazy." I looked in the mirror. My eyes were shining. My cheeks were glowing. I was beautiful, and I knew it. He didn't rush, placed his hands on Sarah, kissed my neck, and in every movement there was respect and desire. His touches were warm, but trembling from restrained tension. He stroked my legs slowly, with pleasure, through thin stockings as if studying every line. I lifted my leg to the edge of the bed, and he casually removed my shoe, then the other, very slowly. I felt warm and scared at the same time. We lay next to each other, fully clothed, just touching each other's palms. He wove my fingers through his and kissed my wrists. This was more intimate than sex. That night, we didn't cross the line. We stopped at the very edge to preserve something or to stretch out the anticipation. But I knew there was no turning back. The next day, everything seemed the same, as if that night had never happened. We met at breakfast, greeted each other formally, as if we hadn't held hands in the dim hotel room. I tried to smile businesslike, discuss the presentation schedule, but inside everything was boiling. I wore a black pencil skirt and a simple white shirt with a soft silk sheen, hair pulled back in a bun, modest earrings and pale pink lipstick. Strict but under the skirt, sheer stockings with garters and thin black lingerie. No one knew except me, and this secret was enough to make every step I took slightly provocative for myself alone. All day we worked at the exhibition. Marcus kept his distance, almost cold, and this drove me crazy. When he accidentally touched my back to move me aside, I shuddered. His hand quickly disappeared, but I felt the warmth where the shadow of his palm remained. I was angry at myself for allowing myself to feel so much. But every glance from him, every word with a slight smirk, seemed deliberately designed to let me know. He remembers, he wants, but he's holding back. After the exhibition, I returned to my room and took a shower. I didn't want anything, no dinner, no walks. I just wanted to lie in a bathrobe on cool sheets and forget. And that's what I did. The light in the room was off. Only street lamps reflected in the window. I lay wrapped in a towel, thinking about him, about his hands, about how he looked when he took off my shoes. At exactly 10:00, a knock at the door. I knew who it was. I opened it. He wore a simple dark t-shirt and sweatpants, the light scent of menthol shower gel. He silently entered, walked to the window, and stood looking at the street. I closed the door and stood motionless. He turned around. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said. I took a step forward, then another. He reached for my face, moved a damp strand from my temple, and kissed me deeply, with growing tension. He pressed me against the wall, but carefully, as if I could push him away at any moment. I didn't push him away. He slowly turned me with my back to him, and I felt his fingers slide along my neck, exposing it. He kissed the back of my head, my shoulders, ran his fingers along my collarbone. I was trembling, not from cold. He lowered the towel from my body, and I stood before him in the dim light in lace lingerie and stockings. I felt no shame, only the desire to be seen, accepted, desired. He ran his hand along my thighs, paused at the edge of the stocking, slowly lifted it with his finger, almost imperceptibly, but it was incredibly arousing. He loved details. I understood that. "You're incredible," he whispered. "And in this, there was not 'you're beautiful,' but 'you're real. You're dangerous. You're my weakness.'" I turned around and reached for him myself. His t-shirt was warm from his body. I felt him hold his breath when my fingers touched his stomach under the fabric. I wasn't hurrying, studying him as if touching a man for the first time. I wanted to remember everything, how his skin responded to my touches, how his neck tensed when I kissed his ear. He sat me on the edge of the bed and began kissing my knees, slowly moving up, through the thin fabric of stockings, through lace, and stopped. He didn't cross the line again. He seemed to be stretching out this torture, and I liked it. We lay next to each other, foreheads touching, naked but not crossing the line. Two adults connected by something much deeper than physical. In the morning, I woke up alone. On the nightstand, a note. "I don't know what will happen to us, but I don't regret a single second." On the third day, the exhibition was ending. We had a return train to Atlanta at 8:00 p.m. Everything that had happened before seemed like a dream, sweet, anxious, inexorably slipping away. Marcus was quiet and focused, as if everything in him had returned to its place, and I couldn't look away. I put on a light gray sheath dress with a thin belt, with it pumps with medium heels, a small leather bag, and a watch on a narrow strap. My hair was pulled back in a high ponytail, and my lips wore matte cherry-colored lipstick. I looked elegant and strict, but under the dress was a thin corset with soft boning gently hugging my body. My little rebellion. The last meetings, business handshakes, exchange of business cards, everything merged into a hum. I caught Marcus's glances, and each of his looks was like a breath of wind under my dress, invisible to others but stripping me to the soul. We rode in a taxi to the station. I sat in the back, he next to me. Between us, a few centimeters of air and silence. Only on a turn did his hand rest on my thigh. Unnoticed, under the fabric, and remained. I didn't remove it. The compartment was quiet. We found ourselves alone. This happened by chance. Or maybe he specially arranged it. I didn't ask. Soft nightlight, the swaying of the train, monotonous rumble of rails. I sat on the lower bunk, took off my shoes, and stretched out my legs. He sat opposite, looking at me. "You knew you were driving me crazy when you came to the exhibition in that dress. And you knew what you were doing to me when you weren't touching me." He silently moved over to me, unhurriedly embraced my ankle, brought it to his lips, kissed through thin stockings, slowly, with love. He removed them from me, one then the other, gently rolling them up like expensive fabric. His movements were respectful and obsessed at the same time. He looked at my feet as if they were the most beautiful part of the body, as if he was reading them like poetry. I became hot, not from embarrassment, from admiration. He admired me. He moved higher, kissed my knees, thighs, but didn't touch the most forbidden zone. Again, tension. Again, the game. I pressed against him. My hands crept under his sweater. His skin was hot. He pulled it off, remained in a thin t-shirt, then removed it. On his chest was a thin trail of hair. I ran my nail along it and he sharply inhaled. "Say no if you want me to stop," he whispered. I answered with a kiss. We were on the edge. Almost, but not completely. He allowed himself to caress every part of my body except the most yearning. I writhed, gasped with desire, and he watched and waited. He didn't strive to take. He waited for me to ask myself, and I asked, in a whisper, a confession, "Please." He lifted me in his arms and laid me on the bed. His movements were careful, almost sacred. He pulled my dress off me and remained looked for a long time without touching, and I lay with arms spread, with half-open lips, with eyes full of expectation. In this second, I felt not just like a woman, I felt like I was alive. And suddenly, a knock on the compartment door. "Ticket check." We both startled. He quickly threw a blanket over me. The conductor glanced in, waved his hand, and left. We looked at each other, silent. We were already on the edge, and everything was interrupted. He lay down next to me, squeezed my hand, and said, "So not today." Atlanta met us with rain. The sky was gray as if someone had applied a silence filter to the city. We left the car at different times, as if we hadn't been together in that compartment where time had stopped. I caught his glance at the exit. He was anxious, almost painfully restrained. We didn't speak anymore. Not at the station, not later at the office. I returned home late, tired and tense. My husband had prepared dinner, asked about the business trip, joked. I smiled automatically, as if I was standing behind glass watching someone else's life. I wore home sweatpants, a soft sweater, and my hair in a bun, but in my head, I was still lying in that compartment in his arms. The next day, regular work. Documents, calls, reports. Marcus behaved distantly, as if nothing had happened. I also tried to pretend, but something inside me was broken. I felt a lack, a thirst, not just for physical touch, but specifically for him, his gaze, his careful, gentle violence against my composure. 3 days later, I received a short message from him. "Are you free tonight? Need to discuss a project." I knew it wasn't about a project. We met at a coffee shop in the Buckhead area, unremarkable with old brick walls and the smell of vanilla. I wore a long skirt, the color of wet asphalt, a sweater with an open shoulder, and flat leather boots. My hair was down, and my lips had almost invisible gloss. Under the sweater, a lace-up bustier. Just so, to feel beautiful. He was already waiting in a light shirt and camel-colored coat. In his eyes was again that tension I remembered from our first meeting. "Let's go to my place," he said after 15 minutes, without unnecessary words. I didn't ask where his wife was. Didn't ask why. Just nodded. The apartment was in an old building near Midtown. High ceilings, hardwood floors, books on shelves, velvet curtains. He silently took off his coat and approached me. His hands rested on my waist. Lips touched my neck. There was no more almost. There was now. He pulled my sweater off me, not abruptly, but slowly, as if unwrapping a gift. When he saw the lacing on the bustier, he smiled. "This is for me?" I nodded. He ran a finger along the ribbon and began to untie it as if it were a ritual. He took off my shoes, knelt down, and held my feet in his palms for a long time. Kissed my feet, massaged my toes, stroked my calves as if it were art. He said he loved watching a woman relax. I really relaxed for the first time in many years. He lay next to me. His hand rested on my stomach, warm, confident. I felt protected and at the same time vulnerable to trembling. When he touched my thigh and slowly moved up, I held my breath. His fingers were gentle, as if touching living flesh for the first time. He studied me like a sculptor. He knew where to stop, where to intensify, where to simply breathe in my ear. And this was enough for me to grip the sheets. We were in this dance without words, only body, breathing, glances. I didn't notice how it got dark. Only his voice brought me out of half sleep. "Will you stay?" I didn't know what to answer. He looked, waited, and then I told the truth. "I don't know how to live when you're not here." After that night, I didn't return home. I told my husband I was delayed on the business trip for a day. He didn't suspect. He even wished me luck. And I was sitting in another man's bed in his shirt, drinking black coffee and watching him tie his tie in front of the mirror. "Will you stay?" he asked again, glancing over his shoulder. "Until evening," I answered, lowering my eyes. I didn't know who I was. A mistress, a deceived wife who became a traitor, a woman who finally felt alive. All day I sat in his apartment, walked barefoot on the hardwood floor, read a book on his couch, looked at photographs on the walls. One of them, he with his wife. Young, beautiful, with brown eyes, a sincere, loving smile. I looked at her, and cold grew inside me. He returned closer to 8, with a bag, a bottle of wine, and a look that said, "I also don't understand what's happening." We dined in silence. I felt he wanted to say something, but couldn't. At some point, I couldn't stand it. "How much longer will we live in this bubble?" He didn't answer, just poured himself wine, and then said, "I'm not ready." And then, everything unraveled. And I'm ready. I destroyed my family inside myself. I lied, avoided my husband, looked into your eyes when you kissed my feet, as if it were more than just lust. "You think I did this for a game?" "No," he said quietly. "I fell in love too." I laughed, bitterly. "Only you fell in love conveniently, without decisions, without risks. While I burn, you watch me burn." He approached, tried to take my hands. I pulled away. "Don't touch me. I want you to remember me exactly like this. Strong, even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts." I took my bag, threw on my coat, and left. Outside, it was freezing. The air cut my skin, but inside, it was hot. I walked through the dark streets of Atlanta that we had once walked together, and felt something tearing away from him with each step. In the subway car, I stood holding the handrail and stared into emptiness. I wore high boots, a skirt, a shirt, a black coat. Under the coat, nothing. I had removed my underwear before leaving. This was goodbye, a small ritual, the last fetish he would never see. I returned home late. My husband was sleeping. In the kitchen stood a mug with tea, a note. "Don't forget to eat. Love you." I sat on a stool, looked at the paper, and cried quietly, soundlessly, because everything I had destroyed was not only in my head. 3 weeks later, Marcus quit. They said he moved to Minneapolis. I didn't look for him, but sometimes passing by a shoe store window, where there were those same pumps in which he kissed my ankles, I felt a light prick. So I'm alive.